Good morning. We're just going to switch the machine that's presenting, and we'll start in just a second. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for having me today. My name is Sam George. I direct our Azure IoT engineering efforts. Today I've been asked to come and present an interesting talk, which is not only about the work that our customers and partners are doing, but also some of the lessons that have been learned along the way. And I think that's important to reflect at this stage in the IoT journey, which in many respects is still just getting started. So let's look at some of those. One of them is that we've seen that IoT really isn't just a technology revolution. It's actually more of a business revolution that's being enabled by technology. I think the last talk really highlighted some of the demonstrable benefits. They're very clear and quite significant. But one of the most interesting parts is the transformation that IoT has on businesses themselves. That impact is massive, no question. But there's another really interesting thing, too, is that the positive impact on people and the environment and on sustainability is equally massive. This is one of the best parts about being part of IoT, is the positive impact that it can have on people and on the planet, which I think all of us are very concerned about. So, interestingly, having worked with so many customers and so many partners, what we've seen again and again is that IoT really does require a digital transformation. And what I mean by that is that there's not just a move from the world of analog to the world of digital, but also in terms of organizations and how businesses do business. The technology parts of IoT at this point are fairly straightforward. What's interesting is that the hardest part of digital transformation is the transformation part itself. So, it's easy at this point in the industry to connect to platforms such as Azure IoT and send trillions of messages from billions of devices to be able to find insights across all of those. But when it comes time to start adopting this within businesses, we see that businesses go through, in a way, a digital adolescence. If you're simply doing something like taking an on-prem data center and moving that to the cloud, that doesn't require a lot of digital transformation. That's sort of a lift and shift operation. But when you have to start thinking about new business models, retraining sales fields, being able to have IT and OT teams work together in partnership, that actually requires a real business transformation. And if not done correctly, can cause IoT to stall out. So we're going to talk about some of the ways that we're seeing that work in companies and some of the ways that we're seeing it not work. We're also going to talk about some of the solutions that are being built on top of Azure and Azure IoT by our partners. So we have tens of thousands of customers that are in production already in Azure IoT. And I thought what we would do is highlight two of them. The first is Steelcase, and Steelcase is a great example. Steelcase, for those that don't know, is a leading supplier of office furniture and office materials. Now, this is a really interesting digital transformation story because it's not just about Steelcase adopting new IoT technologies, but it's also about Steelcase transforming themselves as an organization to rise to the challenge. So to set up the scenario about Steelcase, what Steelcase is doing is instead of just simply delivering office furniture, they're starting to deliver workplace productivity. Workplace productivity is an important part of a workplace, undoubtedly. And how do you know whether you have a productive workspace? Well, one of the first and important things you have to do is to be able to measure it. And so what Steelcase is doing now with a new solution they call Workplace Advisor is to introduce IoT sensors into the environment and a new application that runs on mobile devices, as well as for business administrators, that gives them deep insights into workplace productivity. So to demonstrate this, let me show you what this looks like. They have a mobile application that knowledge workers carry around with them. It enables them to find rooms, to book conferences, and find their coworkers. And they can actually see the location of their coworkers if that coworker opts in. So they take privacy very, very seriously, and no employee's location is shared without their consent. So in this case, 3 people were added to a meeting, and one of them was remote. And so the workplace advisor's personal assistant automatically finds conference rooms that have telepresence and video teleconferencing capabilities. So it'll find a meeting close to them. The other thing is, if a user opts in, it knows where they are, so it schedules meetings right next to where they are. And in today's modern workplaces with open space, that's an important thing, is to be able to find quickly not only where your coworkers are, but also where free locations are. So in this case, the system has figured out that someone's remote, and so it's booked a room with teleconferencing. I can simply go and find all the different spaces that are nearby that have that capability. I can add how much time that I want for the meeting. And one of the things that Steelcase has done with Workplace Advisor is to integrate deeply with Office 365. So when these meetings are booked, they're simply booking into the Office 365 Exchange system. So if someone's using Outlook, they'll be able to see these meetings too. So the invites have been sent now, and the meeting starts. One of the frequent challenges with meetings is extending the meeting itself. And so Workplace Advisor's personal assistant automatically notifies employees that the meeting is over, and it gives them the opportunity to book more time. Now, after the meeting's over, it asks for qualitative feedback about the meeting space. It asks for things like, how was the space? How was the technology? How were things like privacy? And all of these metrics that a business can create are completely controllable by that business, whatever's important to them. And it even enables employees to give feedback about the space. And then all of this rich information over time is shared with building administrators who can use this to determine, is the workplace actually meeting the needs of our employees? How is the space being utilized? And so this is what their dashboard looks like. It shows space utilization, energy consumption. You can look over days, weeks, or months. And you can see energy utilization is down in this case, and space utilization is up. Another thing that enables building administrators to do is look floor by floor and compare how different spaces are doing. So a typical thing that happens once you get this kind of insights is to be able to compare spaces. Why is one space doing better than another? So in this case, Workplace Advisor enables you to drill down and find different rooms and compare and contrast the two. So for example, there's a room here, Whitney, and another one, Shasta, and both of these are on the same floor. And Workplace Advisor enables building administrators to compare these two and to find out how much was it being used at each point during the week, when are peak hours, and it inspects all of the different furniture that's already been delivered as part of that space. And then when I drill in, I can see not just qualitative information, but quantitative as well. And so I can go and see all the comments that were generated about this particular space. In this case, I see a lot of comments about privacy. Privacy in terms of we need a little bit more of not an open space, because potentially we're working on a secret project and we don't want this space to be able to be seen from others within the organization. And so what Steelcase is doing now, and this is where Steelcase's transformation is coming, is not just selling office furniture and office materials, but to also recommend it based on deep insights that are being powered by IoT sensors. They're collecting hundreds of millions of events every single week from these solutions, and to be able to provide rich recommendations. So in this case, you can see they're recommending architectural film that will provide a layer of privacy. And a building administrator can simply add these. And then they can also show, based on other solutions in aggregate, how much of an improvement is that going to provide in terms of privacy and in terms of workplace satisfaction. The other thing that Steelcase has done is that they've partnered with Microsoft and Azure IoT, and as well as Office 365 for this rich integration. And the reason why they've done that is because then they didn't have to go and build all of the capabilities to process these billions of signals that are coming. One of the things that they found in their pilots, they had several customers as part of their pilots that were really, really difficult customers. For example, leading architectural firms. And these leading architectural firms knew a whole lot about their space. They were quite adept at it. And so they thought, well, let's try Workplace Advisor out on one of these leading architectural firms and see what happens. And one of these firms already knew a lot about how their space was being utilized. For example, they had a lot of big buildings, big meeting rooms, like 12-person and 18-person meeting rooms, and they were being fully utilized. In fact, they were being utilized so much that they were in the process of securing new space to build new meeting rooms to keep up with the demand. And so they deployed Workplace Advisor, and one of the things they found, because they had IoT devices that were out in the meeting rooms that were measuring occupancy, is that, yes, indeed, these large meeting rooms were being used, but oftentimes, it was about 30% of the time, they were being used by only one person. And that one person was conducting a business meeting on a phone call in that room, and the root cause of that was that they didn't have enough phone space. And so what they did is, instead of adding new meeting space, they simply added some new phone spaces, which dropped demand on their meeting rooms, and it kept them from having to move out into new spaces. It's a great example. So how did Steelcase do this? So Steelcase is ingesting hundreds of millions of points every single week as part of Workplace Advisor. And these types of data points are coming in a time series fashion. And that time series fashion is simply sensor occupancy data measuring at a certain frequency, every second, every minute, every hour. Processing all of this data, storing it, indexing it, querying it is very difficult, much less visualizing it. And so Steelcase is taking advantage of Azure Time Series Insights to do this. What Azure Time Series Insights lets you do is store time series data directly from IoT devices at any scale. It's a hyperscale, globally available system. You simply send data to it. You don't have to tell us what the schema of that data is. We will automatically find what the schema is, automatically index this, and enable you to search over billions of records in seconds, because we're indexing that at hyperscale. And so instead of having to do batch analysis that takes overnight, they're able to do this in real time. So let me show you quickly what that looks like. So this is what Azure Time Series looks like. It's not only a data store, but it's also a rich user interface that enables you to browse across all sorts of time series data and to look at different views of it. For example, heat maps, where I can look at different occupancy data. And it's secured by default. So if you haven't logged in for a while, it'll prompt you to log in again, which I'm going to do right now for you. There we go. So it enables views such as not just charting and graphs and stacked charts, but also heat maps as well. And those heat maps can be useful to see patterns in data that weren't possible before. So I'll show you what a heat map looks like as soon as it loads this environment. It's loading all of this data, billions of pieces of information. And so here's what a heat map looks like across all of these sensor data. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to our next topic. Another partner that we want to highlight is Schneider Electric. And it's a happy accident that we happen to follow them today, but Schneider Electric's been a great partner of us with Azure IoT. And we very much believe in open ecosystems and partnerships in IoT, such as the one that we have with Schneider Electric. They have a great example of a solution that they've deployed in the country of New Zealand to help with agriculture use. So I'm going to show you a demo of what that looks like. Great. So I'll go ahead and sign into this. So to set up the scenario a little bit, 70% of water on the planet is being consumed by agriculture. And by 2050, estimates are that we'll need another 50% more water for irrigation. That's a tremendous amount of impact on the planet, and we simply have to get better and more efficient at water usage. The country of New Zealand has done an exceptional job limiting water and controlling this, and forcing solutions like the one Schneider Electric has deployed. What the solution does is it enables farmers to take control of the insights and gain insights into their crops, gain insights into their farms, and reduce the water and the amount of energy that's being used for that water. So for example, I can use the power of the cloud to see things like weather, wind information, as well as temperature. I can look at all of the farms and how they're going to be impacted. And I see that I have an alert. Many of these farms are large circular plots with booms that can stretch out to over a mile. And if any of these booms wind up getting in the way of a windstorm and getting perpendicular to the wind, they can blow over, causing millions of dollars of damage and potential crop loss. So I see I have a high wind warning, and I go and investigate that. Now I see an aerial view of the farm, and there's lots of different crops that are being grown here. Now one of the things that's important is that there's water that's being pumped out of the rivers, and that water is being used, being put into storage tanks, and then being sprayed on all the different crops. If I look at the water consumption from the rivers, I can see what my storage levels are across all of the different storage tanks. And I can see what the river levels are over time. What Schneider Electric has done in partnership with local ISVs to deploy these solutions is to create very sophisticated machine learning that takes into account many, many different factors to figure out the ideal time to pump water out of these rivers into storage tanks. So it takes into account all sorts of factors, including pending weather. So if it's going to be raining, we're not going to need to pump as much water. How much electricity costs at that certain time? And am I going to go, as I'm pumping this water, between low use and high demand energy and increase the amount of energy cost? It takes into account how much water is already in the fields, because there's sensors in the fields that are measuring at different depths. It takes all of this into account, and then it helps farmers optimize their energy usage. Farmers that have deployed this already are saving over 2/3 of their electric bill from simply a little bit of machine learning that Schneider Electric has developed. So I still see that I have this alert. If I drill into this particular farm, what you see is there's this boom, and what these booms are in the lower right-hand corner is it has a series of sprayers that waters the field. Now each one of these sprayers is located above a set of sensors that are measuring the amount of moisture in the ground directly below it. And so the sprayers will only spray when the ground actually needs it. The other thing that Schneider's done is to develop edge intelligence, and that edge intelligence takes advantage of cognitive services to be able to actually look through cameras and decide whether it's time to spray something. So for example, if one of those sprayers is over a ditch and the water's going to run over anyway, it simply turns off the sprayer. This is how they're able to save tremendous amounts of water for these farmers, in addition to reducing their energy bills. So the whole point of this alert was that there's a pending weather event, and that weather event is going to impact this boom. And so farmers are able to actually have remote control over these now and can execute an adjustment of these booms to keep them out of harm's way and move them parallel to the pending windstorm to prevent damage. This is a great example of IoT in the cloud as well as IoT on the edge. And speaking of that, we think that there's a natural balance that's going to occur between the edge of the network on IoT devices and the cloud. We don't think that all IoT devices needs to be sent to the cloud, or IoT data needs to be sent to the cloud, or should be sent to the cloud. For example, when Schneider Electric's technology is processing all these local events, for example, sensor information that's coming from the ground, and deciding which nozzle to turn on at which point as the boom's over it, there's no need for all of that information to be sent to the cloud. That can all be processed locally, and it should be processed locally. So let's talk about some of the technology that Schneider Electric is using in order to achieve these. The first is Azure Machine Learning. And Azure Machine Learning, we just announced a revolutionary new advancement in our machine learning capabilities. What this enables is a very sophisticated data wrangling platform that enables data scientists to find the best insights. What we found in our first generation of machine learning is that 70% of a data scientist's time is spent simply cleansing and wrangling data. So we created an optimized workbench that can run right on your laptop for cleansing and wrangling data. Once a machine learning insight or scoring algorithm is produced, that can now be deployed to either Azure, to on-premises in SQL Server or Machine Learning Server, or into Azure IoT Edge, which is our new runtime for running right on IoT devices with as little as 128 megabytes of memory in a secure way. So this balance that Schneider is deploying as far as between the edge and the cloud is being employed or is being enabled by this new Azure IoT Edge technology. And the way that it works is that all of the same intelligence that Schneider is generating in the cloud with machine learning, Azure Stream Analytics, Azure Functions, they can simply deploy that down to IoT devices. And so before, historically, what you'd have to do is pay an embedded developer to develop custom logic down on a device. And instead now you can simply take that same cloud logic that you've already developed in the cloud and simply push it down to IoT devices. And not just push down to IoT devices, but also to be able to control it, to patch it, to update it. So this is a very powerful capability to help enable the next generation of solutions in IoT. Now, as you start to push more and more workloads down to the edge, security is absolutely paramount. In the cloud, we maintain security with armed guards, with very rich security that we have all the way from operating systems in the cloud, to the VMs in the cloud, to monitoring agents that are running on the virtual machines. But out on the edge on devices, many times these devices are left alone. And so rich security is absolutely paramount on these. You simply cannot tolerate a device that can be tampered with and inject malware on. And so we've been partnering across the industry to produce very, very secure edge devices. This is a very important part of our proposition in IoT because Microsoft has a long history in security, and we're bringing that to bear fully in IoT. So we're pleased to announce partnerships with Sequitur Labs, NXP, and Microchip on Azure IoT Edge. And over in our booth, we have a demo of all of this working from the ground up, from silicon to device to operating system, keeping the Internet of Things secure. So I also wanted to spend a minute just talking about lessons learned. As I mentioned, one of the biggest impacts of IoT is on businesses themselves, as far as business organizations, not even as much on the technology side. So what are some of those things? Well, obviously, there's an IT-OT coordination that has to happen. And how does this work best? One of the best ways that we've seen for IT and OT to partner together is to start expanding their minds from simply being IT and OT to being able to partner. And one of those best ways to be able to do that is to start thinking in terms of roles. And what those roles are is there's some roles that are concerned with the manufacturing or integration of devices. There's some roles that are concerned with developing and deploying solutions. And there's some roles that are concerned with operating devices. And if an IoT solution is planned from the beginning with these roles in mind, and if you have IT and OT representatives that are participating in each of these roles and are thinking about and being respectful to each other's disciplines, you have a much higher chance of success in IoT with these two roles. And this is part of the transformation that simply has to happen to make IoT work. There's another thing that we've learned from working with many of these companies and partners of seeing successful IoT projects and seeing projects that stall out or fail. One of those is that top-down executive support is absolutely critical. In fact, business decision makers, it's very important for them in a vertical to be able to decide that they're going to embark on IoT and to have top-down support. Oftentimes, if it's a bottom-up project, by the time it gets to funding, that project doesn't get greenlit. So top-down support is an important part. The other thing is many businesses have multiple verticals, and we watch businesses wrestle with this challenge of how many verticals do I start IoT in? Do I create a common team that empowers all of them, or do I simply start in one vertical? And what we found in our time in IoT is that the businesses that embark on the IoT journey and start in one vertical are often the most successful, empowered, of course, by a business executive. And when they do that, the best practices are to prove out IoT within that vertical, to prove the ROI, and to also be able to assess the impact that that solution is going to have across sales organization, across engineering organizations. So before you move to additional verticals, it's important to understand what the impact's going to be. So some of our earliest adopters did just this. They started in one vertical, and then now they're spreading to additional verticals because they already have the blueprint, and so there's less chaos as they try to do this. One of the challenges that we've seen is that sometimes a leader at the CEO level or the CXO level wants to embark aggressively on IoT, and so they create a central team across their organization that starts building an IoT platform or IoT offerings. And sometimes that can work, but oftentimes that winds up getting rejected by the different verticals because the different verticals don't feel like it meets their specific needs. Another advice that we provide to customers and partners is to develop a software practice in IoT. It's very important. It's important to partner, and there's no one company on the planet or no one customer that can simply go to one vendor and get an IoT solution built. But it is important to start a software practice. Some of the most successful companies that we've seen have software practices, and then when they bring in partners, those software practices are very adept at exactly what they want the partner to do and can coordinate and provide air traffic control for all of the different partners in that solution. And then finally, expand to different verticals. Nail it and then scale it and move on from there. So the IoT journey is just beginning. We're at the very forefront of a bunch of breakthrough innovations and breakthrough optimizations in both productivity, sustainability, and more. We're thrilled to be part of this journey. We're humbled to be here, and we're so excited to be part of the innovation that's happening across the world of IoT. Thank you for your time.